Good morning and welcome to the Extended Disc 30-minute webinar. Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about using team assessments. And for those of you that have been following along, today's part is part 3 of using team assessments. And today we're focusing on organizational level applications. If you weren't able to catch part 1 and part 2, no worries. We'll give you an update. Not only that, we have recorded those past 30-minute webinars, and you'll find them on our Extended Disc website under webinars. My name is Christina Bowser, and I'm a senior trainer here at Extended Disc. And joining me today is my boss and president of Extended Disc North America. Welcome, Marku.
Thank you, Christina.
So as always, we don't have, unfortunately, the time we would like to answer questions live, but please feel free to post your questions in the questions section, and I promise you we will follow up with you after today's session. So why don't we pick up where we started and get right into using team assessments, but this time at an organizational level?
Absolutely, Christina, and good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, depending what part of the world you are in. So now we are in the part 3 of this 3 webinar series using the team assessments. And today we are really going to talk about the most macro level applications. And this is the one I personally enjoy the most, looking at the organization's part of it and begin to slice the data. But let's kind of remind everybody how we got there. In a part 1, we really talked about how we use the team assessment in team applications. And what I mean there is how we help the team members to really understand not only who they are as individuals, but what they look like as a team. What are the team dynamics? Help them understand what might be some of the underlying causes for the friction that they may have among the team members, or some even conflicts, so they can really begin to understand what they need to do individually and collectively to elevate team performance. In part 2, we looked at the information from the perspective of the manager, where we can provide the manager's playbook so they can understand not only how to use the individual assessments to be more effective one-on-one with the employees, but how to most effectively motivate, communicate, and lead their team. And today in the part 3, we are going to look at this more from the CEO or C-level or the owner level perspective of how to use this information to really understand the organization, how to become a more effective leader, and how to understand some of the organizational challenges that the company may be experiencing.
Okay, so where do we start?
Well, let me start about kind of the big picture, again, how we really got here. The way the process works is that the progression is that the employees only have to complete that 10-minute questionnaire one time. Once we have that data, we can provide all of this, what we're talking about in the past webinars and talking about today. So they can, of course, first get the individual assessment for the individual development. So let's say I'm a salesperson. I get my sales assessment. I begin to understand what is my natural style and how I tend to communicate, make decisions, how to buy, how I sell. So I can begin to have a clear understanding what kind of changes I need to make my behavior when interacting with different prospects or customers, for example. Now, obviously, we can do this any kind of job role, be a leader, customer service, that really doesn't matter. Here we're talking about individual development. Then we can, if we want to, we don't have to do this, we can provide that employee's manager information about that employee, how they can become a more effective manager, how you can manage them, how you can develop, coach that employee. So now we are really looking at the individual assessments.
So you're taking that same DISC information when the employee completed the questionnaire, but just that report is customized for the manager, is what you're saying.
For the manager, and of course we can customize the report for different job roles and industries to make sure that the information is really most accessible and most relevant for the employee and the manager.
Right.
From there on, we can move to these team applications. One, we can provide information for the team. This is how you can become more effective. This is what you look like as a team. And that's where you have those aha moments where a team member may realize, now I understand why I have so easy time working with Bob, but I'm having really difficult time working with Barbara. And that's when you begin to understand those team dynamics, yet using the very safe and clearly defined DISC framework. So we are talking about behaviors and we are not categorizing them in a good or bad type of way. And we begin to understand how we are different as human beings.
So when you mean safe, you're just basically going back to the fact that DISC itself does not make value judgments.
Exactly. So there's nothing good or bad. We are just different in understanding what those differences are and how, as individuals, we need to and can control our behavior to enhance those interactions with one another.
Excellent.
Then we can get to that next level. We can provide manager day playbooks so they can have a very concise and clear information about how to be most effective with their team. Mm-hmm. Not only effective with the individual team members, but as a team. How do I communicate with them? How do I anticipate problems? How do I modify my behavior when I'm communicating with my entire team?
So the difference between this manager's playbook and then the manager's report, one can be targeted to the manager at the individual level, one employee, and then the manager's playbook is for the manager, but targeted to how they can effectively lead their team.
Exactly. So provide them very clear information and to have quick access to it, and they can make quick decisions. How do I best how do I best lead the individuals, and how do I best lead the team?
Okay.
And now finally, we get into today's topic. How do we look at all of this information from a more strategic perspective? Not looking at just the individuals or the teams. We can even look at different departments, different divisions, different regions, an entire organization. So we really have information to make better decisions.
Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit more now about that strategic tool at the executive or owner level?
Yes, and what I really... When I look at this application, what it is, it's an analytical tool. My background, as you, Christina, may know, I used to be in banking a long time ago, over 2 decades ago. But when I was in banking, my role was a commercial lender. Mm-hmm. And when we made loan decisions, we had to. I mean, there was no choice. You had to have financial information to make those loan decisions. You really needed to assess if the borrower could repay the loan and how comfortably they can do it. And there was no option to, hey, does it feel like this loan might be repaid? You had to have a very thorough analysis and information that you could trust. Mm-hmm. However, when it comes to making decisions about our organization's workforce, and a lot of leaders, and I think it's a fact for a lot of organizations, the employees are their most valuable asset. They're often forced to make those decisions about how to lead their organization and how to make decisions about their organization kind of in vacuum, and they really don't have any good information or sometimes no information to make those decisions. So what the extended DISC allows the leaders to have is to have access to that information so they don't have to. If you think of being a captain of the ship, you need your navigation tools to be able to navigate your ship. And this is what the extended DISC provides at a strategic level. Make those decisions with confidence because you have the metrics to understand what's really happening.
All right. So
what I would like to add is really the idea is that not only does it provide guidance to make those decisions, but as I see our clients use the tool, I think often what it really does is it helps the leaders to ask the right questions. Because when you begin to look at this data from different angles, it begins to uncover some issues that they may not have been aware of. It doesn't always provide the answers, but often it provides the very important questions to ask so you can move forward and elevate the organization's performance.
That's a great way to look at that. So let's go ahead. Can we go ahead and talk about some examples at this point?
Yeah, and this topic is so wide we could talk about different examples all day. But let me just give you a couple, and the first one that I'm going to show is an example. We stay with the sales theme. Mm-hmm. This would be an example of a company in pharmaceutical industry, and we are looking at their entire sales force. So they had 118 salespeople. I'm going to look at a macro level what kind of sales professionals I have. And honestly, Christina, when I look at this, to me, it doesn't really tell them all that much. The only thing I can kind of notice that this particular client company has less S-style sales professionals as the L3 styles. Mm-hmm. But it really doesn't tell me all that much. Really, when I begin to slice this data in different ways, and as you know, we can do this on real time with the executive dashboard, that's when the story begins to evolve. And if we look at these 118 salespeople, there's a number of ways we can slice it. One could be, let's just look at the top sales performers. And here, when we take the top 9 salespeople, the most productive ones, the story begins to emerge. Now, I'm not saying that we just should jump into conclusion here that D&I styles are the best salespeople.
Right.
And in fact, the critical thing when you use this as a tool for making organizational decisions is that you don't jump into conclusions too quickly. You begin to slice the data different ways, and basically the story evolves. And the danger is that when you see the first slice, oh, that's the story. That may be the story, but we need to be very careful that we don't automatically assume that.
Right, because if I saw that first slide, I'd basically say, oh, we're not hiring any S's because there aren't a lot of S's. But again, as we always said in our previous webinars, you have to put it into context. It's just one more piece of information that you can use, but you can't over assume.
Exactly. So, for example, here, we don't know how long these people have been with the organization.
Right.
Maybe they were hired less than 6 months ago and they're doing great now, but we have no information yet to understand will they actually stay and succeed with us.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me of one other client company. Their top salespeople were also on the right side of the model. But when they begin to analyze the information, they realize that those top salespeople were the people who sold the most product for a given month. And when they look at the monthly top producers, they were almost always on the right side of the model. But when they begin to analyze the production over a longer time period, in their case, they looked at 6 months or longer, the story changed completely. It was the I and S styles who could produce more. They did not produce most in a given month, but they were more consistent with their production because those D&I styles simply were not as loyal to the organization. They came in, stayed a few months, and left. So that's an example how you need to begin to look at the information a little bit more at a deeper level.
So if I'm a CEO or a leader and I'm looking at this, it is automatic. I'm like, oh, you're showing me my top producers. Let's go and hire more D's and I's. But like you said, it's really just a snapshot of the whole environment. We have to have more information. But again, it gives us some information. And we know that anytime you are training new people, it's time and money. So, if people are leaving your organization, that's critical information as well.
That's right. And again, you need to slice it different ways. And it doesn't cost our clients anything. They can do it different ways. Other example, I keep hearing the word term millennials. I mean, what challenge, etc. People are very interested in that topic. You can slice this data for different generations. Maybe you'll start looking at your top producers for different age groups. What kind of trend do you have there? Maybe you want to look at your baby boomers. What is kind of information our data is telling us now? Maybe you want to look at different regions, maybe different store locations. Maybe you want to look at salespeople who happen to be focusing on selling certain products. Now you begin to really understand what creates success. And one thing I've seen more and more of our clients do is they begin to really track the employees that they lose. In the executive dashboard, they often create a folder for their lost employees. And whenever they lose an employee, they move to that folder and they begin to look for any kind of trends that they may see there. Are we losing certain age groups at a higher rate? Are we losing employees in certain parts of the country? Or maybe there's a couple of managers who are having trouble keeping their productive employees.
Or maybe are there certain disc styles that tend to leave our company more than others? But what Markku is talking about right now is, this is why we're so excited about this particular topic, is the executive dashboard. We are talking about using team assessments, and the automatic assumption we might make is, oh, we just keep generating this one standard team assessment report. However, what we are referring to when Markku talks about the executive dashboard is as extended disc clients, you have access to a admin site. And in this admin site, you can create all these files. You can create all these kind of groupings of your employees in a way that you can see the data much more effectively. And you can run these very customized reports. You don't have to run the same standard team assessment report every time, but you can run these specific maps or these groupings that give you more information.
Exactly. And as a top executive or owner of a business, now I have the information to really understand what's happening in my organization. And I don't have to lead it blind. I'm making decisions and I can anticipate problems with with the help of some solid information that is based on my employees and not having to make those decisions based on my past experience, gut feeling, or just hoping that the kind of decisions I'm making about where the organization is going happen to be right.
Exactly. So if you guys want just a quick preview, we did a 30-minute webinar a while back. You can find it on our public website, extendeddisc.org, under webinars. 30 minutes. The webinar itself is called Disc Profiles Beyond Reports. And it will give you kind of a quick preview to that executive dashboard.
Oh, that's great. I forgot we did that.
All right. So how about some other examples or other applications?
Well, this is other one when we're looking at the maybe conflict between different departments or parts of the organization. And I guess the classic one would be between production department and the sales department. Sales folks are promising too much and production department is too slow. So when we begin to slice this data by different departments, let's say we have two groups. One is clearly more of a DC or department, more task oriented. They're really focusing on things and tasks. Another group is more people oriented, when it's more feelings, emotions, and working together and maybe be a little bit more intuitive about how we deal with things. And if these two departments have to interact a lot, there's certainly a lot of not only opportunity to complement one another, but possibly also a lot of reasons for and underlying causes for conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when we talk about team assessment, it's critical to understand all the context. If we knew who the key players here are, maybe the team leaders, who are the individuals who communicate most frequently, I should say, between the departments. Now I can begin to really have a plan. How do I improve the working relationship? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that having this information is going to make anybody completely happy, but now actually can do something to improve the relationship between the two departments.
Exactly. So these are just kind of some examples we've given you at looking at kind of groups and departments. But how about applications that are kind of at a broader organizational level? Can you give some examples of that as well?
With the tool, what you can do is you can look at the entire organization. You have an organization of several hundred employees. And if I'm the CEO, the owner of this business, this would be something that would be very helpful for me to understand what kind of organization I have and help me plan and help me prepare and anticipate problems and challenges. Of course, there are a lot of dynamics here, but at a very macro level, what I would notice very quickly that I tend to have a lot of S-style employees. Depending on my own individual style, let's for sake of example say that I'm a D-style leader. It would be very important for me to understand that I do have a lot of S-style employees who are very happy to execute my plan as long as they completely understand what all the steps are and how we are going to do it. S-styles, we often talk, they are like that freight train. They're a little slow to leave the station, but once they pick up speed, they're unstoppable. And as a leader, I need to make sure that I understand what I need to do in terms of my leadership to get that train moving, provide them enough guidance, and make sure everybody is on board to get them to implement my vision and help us achieve our goals. So it really, again, helps me understand what's really happening. And one of the things we talked about previous webinar on teams, that when we have a lot of similar styles, two things always happen. One is that we will amplify our strengths, and second is we will amplify our weaknesses. So this kind of organization with a lot of S behavior, I would anticipate that one is that once they understand how to do it, they never miss a step. But I also would need to anticipate that they're going to resist the change a little bit. However, if I modify my style and I provide them the necessary information and help them understand and provide the answers to those how questions, I can get them to be very effective, and I can actually be more effective as a leader for an entire organization.
Yeah, the other thing I do notice too is that for me personally, I notice that the bottom half is more populated or heavier than the top half. Is that something that a leader would look at as well?
You need to look at that. And this would be actually, I would say, for every organization, you're going to see concentration of styles, because people do gravitate toward jobs, careers, and organizations that fit their style. Different organizations have a different culture. And for some employees very appealing. For some different styles, it cannot be so appealing, and they look for other opportunities. So all the organizations will have, there might be an exception somewhere in the world, I've never seen it, but they will have concentration of styles. And I must understand what those concentrations are so I can be most effective leader, so I can anticipate, I can prepare, and I can be more successful.
So you're basically saying you've never seen an organization that has equal amounts in every single quadrant. I've never seen that. So
No, I've never seen it either. And typically what you have is two halves of the disk model are most heavily populated. In this particular example, it's the S and I quadrants, making much more people-focused organization. Exactly. Not saying it's good or bad, it's what's the situation with this particular one.
Exactly. So can you give some examples maybe of how our clients use the organizational view?
Once you have the organizational view, some of the things that you can maybe look at is, for example, how do we motivate our organization? As you know, for certain styles, their reward is some other styles' punishment. If I don't know what really motivates my employees, it's impossible for me to be very effective in providing the most effective motivators for everyone. Now, of course, I need to bring it down to individual level too, but I need to understand that macro level view as well. Other one that is very commonly used is how do I most effectively communicate with my organization? Let's say, for example, that there is some significant competitive threat. The organization needs to respond. It's not enough that few of the key players respond. Of course, they need to as well, but often the entire organization needs to respond, and everybody needs to be on the same page and be engaged. And if I don't know how most effectively communicate what we need to do, I'm not going to be as prepared. Other one, launching a very important new product. You see some product launches go horribly wrong because not all the employees really understand what the objectives are. So you need to be very effective in communicating it throughout the organization. And as we know, that's no easy task. Anything that can help me as a leader to be most effective organization throughout the organization will be very, very important. Some of the other ones is how much direction and independence and what kind of leadership style we need to really practice with my organization. If I have a lot of D-style employees versus, let's say, another organization, a lot of S-style employees, my approach needs to be completely different. I must know what that distribution is. And last one that I'm going to share today is how do I best introduce and facilitate change? People keep saying how the speed of change continues to be more rapid every day. I'm sure it's true, and this is becoming a greater challenge for the organization. And again, it begins to work into how my organization is going to deal with change, how much they're going to resist it, what kind of information or what type of information and how much of it they will need to be prepared for it. So it's really preparing the organization to deal with it most effectively as possible. Some of the other things is that we need to understand as leaders what kind of response I'm going to get from my organization when I'm trying to implement something. Are they going to be supportive of it, or are they going to resist it? But ultimately, what it will help me to do it, how do I proactively lead in that kind of situation? How I proactively prepare for it to make sure that as a leader, I'm doing the best things.
Okay. So, Marco, how do we see using this kind of macro level application and just tying it back into what we do here?
Well, the macro level is really to provide the top leadership information, how to be most effective leaders. If you go back to thinking of that captain of the ship, you need the instruments to navigate the ship. If you don't have the charts, if you have your GPS, you're going to be lost at sea. You need to have those tools for you to be available to make sure you get to your destination. At a macro level, we obviously make some strategic decisions, but ultimately it can always comes down to the individual decisions. Let's say I'm a CEO with thousands of employees. Ultimately, I must modify my individual behavior. When I'm communicating with the entire organization, when I'm maybe communicating with my executive team, I always must make decisions about how I modify my behavior. So it starts me as an individual leader, then maybe it goes to my C-level executive team. How do I most effectively lead them? And they begin to execute the plan, and they begin to communicate throughout the organization. So it goes both ways, from the macro level all the way to individual, and then individual back to the macro level again.
Oh, I think that's a great way to end our webinar today. So thank you for joining me, Markku. We don't have a 30-minute webinar coming up in the next few weeks. However, I want to invite you, if you just need a quick 1 hour, well, quick, it's still 1 hour, but it's a 1 hour refresher introduction to what is DIS&C. I encourage, if you guys are already very knowledgeable in it, if you have any coworkers, counterparts, they're more than welcome to attend. To register, just let us know. If you are actually in need of HRCI or SHRM recertification units, they are provided for this particular webinar. It was coming up on Tuesday, July 25th. And it will be from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. It's just something different, is that it will not be recorded because participation earns those units. However, if you can't make it, we do have other What is DIS webinars coming up.
So you're saying that if people attend that they need the recertification credits, they get 1 hour for that?
They get 1 unit, correct.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so please feel free to join us. And again, thank you, Markku, for joining me today.
Thank you, Christina.
All right, you guys, hope you guys are having a great summer, and we'll talk to you guys soon.